rather crazy few weeks here, but lovely to have you all. So yeah, today's discussion event is around rehabilitation and if it's available in the truest sense for everybody or just the select few. And I think the reason that this was kind of triggered as a theme was because we're really pleased to be able to offer, for example, the going forward into employment roles, which are specifically open to people with convictions. But what we're noticing is that there's a criteria that people have to fit into, and if you have certain offences such as sexual offences, if you've committed murder, if you're an arsonist, or if you've committed arson in the past, you're kind of excluded from those opportunities. And it kind of, I suppose, posed the question of how does that sit with us, in the community, and just to kind of deep dive into it, really, how you all feel. Some people will agree with that decision, and then some people will not agree with those decisions. So I think we're just going to shine a bit of a light on the topic and hopefully have a bit of a stimulating discussion, as we always do. And obviously it's open to all, so please participate. I think Adam's gone through the etiquette, but I can't see you guys for some reason on my screen anymore, so I can literally only see the presentation. So you'll have to let me know, Adam, if anybody wants to speak and stuff, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. So yeah, there's exclusions relating to many employment opportunities. The convictions that we've just mentioned, they're not eligible to apply. And then also, linked with that is there's a lot of support organisations such as ours, and also statutory organisations that purport to support ex-prisoners into employment, but they've also got a really strict criteria upon whom they'll provide support for, especially employment support. For example, and this is nothing against the organisations that we're going to be talking about, but Timpson's, a really well-known, well-loved employer of people coming out of prison. They're well known for doing so, but they are open about the fact that they don't take on people that have committed sexual offences and the more serious offences as well. Another organisation that I know of and I've worked closely with is Tempus Novo. They will not support people with sexual offences into work either. We do actually, as an organisation, support any criteria of offence. I personally, as many of you, if not all of you, will know, I'm an ex-prisoner myself. My crime was really serious. It was death by dangerous driving, drink driving, car crash that I had 16 years ago, where my friend died. So in terms of hierarchy of offences, I think I've always struggled with that, even from when I was in prison. Certain prisoners will think that their crimes are far less serious than other categories of offences, and sometimes that's true, but I tend to try not to subscribe to that, because only the victims of our crimes really know how they've been impacted. It's not for us to say and minimise that. So just throwing it open to you guys, what are your sort of initial thoughts around the exclusions and the fact that some support agencies don't support people with sexual offences or more serious offences? Where do you sit in that discussion and that debate? Is there anybody that wants to speak? I don't know how to get your faces up.
If you stop sharing, very clear now to
okay.
Open the discussion up. Exit full screen, maybe.
Yeah.
Where's that?
At the top, I believe.
Shall I just close this window down, maybe?
Yeah, but
hang on, maybe if I go into Zoom. Oh, there you are, you're at the bottom. Hiya. I'm actually quite good with tech, it's just today it's just not working for me. Really? So yeah, has anybody got anything that they wanted to sort of say in terms of just starting the discussion? Who are you all, and where do you sit in this?
Josephine has a hand raised here.
Brilliant. Go, Josephine.
Hello, hi. It's really nice to be involved in this discussion, because I'm from lived-in experience, and I was processed quite a lot of times for mostly having mental health and the reactions to that. And the way that if we're to try and truly rehabilitate people, yes, we have to find ways of making the workforce or the plan more inclusive. and unfortunately not offering people a chance to completely leave criminality behind, it will be the root cause of them re-entering the criminal justice system. So I think it's really commendable what you're doing. It's fantastic. Absolutely amazing, and because you are really putting where your money where the mouth is, you know. And there's a lot of organizations, you're correct, yeah, they just give all the lip service and say that they do want to rehabilitate people. And you know, like from my viewpoint, what I my main focus is on at the moment is people who are not offered jobs because of discrimination, because of their race, ethnicity, and ethnic backgrounds, or even the gypsy and traveller community. They are really marginalised, and especially if they enter the criminal justice system as well. They're a group that massively underrepresented. It's just great to have this opportunity to meet you and to say that what a fantastic job you're doing. So big pat on the back.
I just want to play devil's advocate, Josephine, and you know, this is what I do well. I think it's just posing a different perspective. It doesn't necessarily mean I subscribe to that perspective, but you know, you mentioned about race, which is obviously a protected characteristic. You are not allowed, by no organisation or person is allowed to discriminate against a person because of their ethnicity, age, gender, sexuality, so on, religion. You know, there's 9 protected characteristics. Criminality and a category of offences does not, and in my view should not, ever be a protected characteristic. At the end of the day, your ethnicity is very different to choosing to commit a crime or committing an offence. So I think they need to be separated in the first instance. But I just wondered about, you know, you as a woman, let's personalise it. You're a woman, say if you're working in an organisation that is friendly towards employing people with different categories of offences, how would you feel if your boss turned around and said to you, actually, we're taking on a new member of staff, they have committed a historic sexual offence against a woman, for example, or maybe against a child, they're going to be working closely with you. How do you feel about that?
Yes, well, I'm at the end of the day, I have to, my colleagues there, Chloe Carter as well. Yeah, we have to look at moving forward. I do. I have to, because it's my professional stance. If we're to give people a chance to be sort of give them a chance to have that rehabilitation and to move as far away as possible from that criminal activity, we have to try and make sure that they are given opportunities. Because if we just take those opportunities away and discriminate against them from what they've done, which is however horrific it is, we as a society are then just saying that we're just not going to participate in trying to make sure that they don't do it again and they have a purpose. Because, you know, obviously for some crimes, the reoffending rate is quite high, especially for the sort of crimes against, you know, in that category of yeah.
Well,
so
actually, let's talk about statistical, because I remember doing a bit of research on this a while ago, because it's always been a topic that we've debated as an organisation and externally. But I did some you know, I wanted to know about the reoffending stats for people that have committed the offence of murder and also sexual offences. Where would you guys think that they would sit? I mean, murder, for example, is the least likely. People who have committed the offence of murder are the least likely group to reoffend, statistically speaking. So potentially they're the lowest risk of category because they've obviously served a consequence. And actually sexual offenders are the second least likely group to reoffend. So in terms of risk, really that doesn't weigh up for me. Let's go to some other, thank you, Josephine, come back.
No problem.
Let's go to
Alexander, we've got about 6 people with their hands up, Marie-Claire. Alexander was next to go, I think.
Go, Alexander.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really glad that we have the space to have this conversation. I'm Alexander Rose. I am the head of programs for a London-based charity called Standout. Really short, we work in 3 prisons and we use a coaching approach to help people into employment, but providing holistic support. I guess there's you know, just talking from, you know, our experiences, and also as well, just to kind of name the fact that this is a real personal, like important project for me personally to be kind of trying to advance. Just a number of points. I guess a big point is kind of, when is a person's past in their past? Like I think we've kind of talked about kind of this idea of rehabilitation, and actually when you look at a DVS, when a DVS comes back, all it does is give you information of what's just been done. It doesn't give any color or shape to that person's journey since that offense. And I think there's a kind of wider question that we as kind of, people in the knowledge of the impacts of that, we need to kind of take to employers, and also as well in whatever settings and things we sit in. The biggest thing that we've seen from employers is, I guess, for the employers that are open, they're often very scared of reputational risk. So
can I ask you a question, Alex? And I'm sorry to cut you, but does your organisation employ people with sexual offences?
Well, we've not had that scenario, but we are open to, we do DBS. We do the DBS question upon offer of the role. So we're very forward thinking in that respect. We've not, we're a small charity of 13 people so far, so yeah, we've not had that situation as yet. But we would, like most forward-thinking organisations, treat it on a case-by-case basis. And also as well, it comes to my second point, which is this difference that we see between risk assessment and risk elimination. So a lot of what
can you ever eliminate risk? That's the thing.
Yeah, I know it's a wider question, but yeah, I guess Mary, what I'm trying to articulate is this kind of false kind of notion that just by excluding, putting that arbitrary barrier, that we don't offer opportunities to, and I think this is where the education piece needs to come in, with the relationships that we have with your Timpsons and your other organizations, to kind of challenge them. And I think that, for some organizations in the space, there is this sense of, in the rush for outcomes and in the rush for getting someone into employment, we tend to kind of tread lightly on challenge and kind of actually they cream off the top, don't they? A lot of the organizations, they take the easy to place. Yeah, but I think there's also a role for us as organizations to be more direct and to almost put the relationships with employers on the line, to kind of say, actually, because I think that stat that you said right at the start, like how, I mean, and I'm talking about ourselves as well when I'm saying this, how often do we say to employers that, that people convicted for murder and people convicted of sexual offences are the least likely to go on to reoffend? How often do we pull those threads into conversations when you see those blanket bans? And that's a kind of challenge, even for myself as a leader in this space, that I'm kind of, asking. It's so much so that I'm, in the process of setting up a social enterprise to try and address that and to offer employment, because I guess my perspective that I've landed on in 10 years working in this space is the best way to kind of challenge the kind of commercial mindsets around risk and reputation is to set up a thriving commercial enterprise that can model that and then go on to educate. So I'll leave it there because I see loads of hands up, but yeah, I'm just delighted that this conversation is happening.
Yeah, us too. Thanks, Alex. Who's next? I'm just reading the chat discussion as well at the same time.
You're on mute, Edmund, at the moment.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi there. I think, for me personally, as an ex-offender, I spent a total of 20 years within the prison system, and the lowest rung were the sex offenders, because we all want to think that our place in the pecking order is right for whatever reasons, by our conditioning. I left that life 16 years ago. If you'd have asked me when I was a prisoner, I would have said anybody can be rehabilitated apart from sex offenders. But I'm being honest.
Yeah, yeah. You're not on your own with that as well. Let's be honest. That is the general rule of thumb, isn't it?
The last 16 years, I've changed my life, and I now work with paedophiles because I would rather work with somebody and them having accountability based on my experiences than to just dismiss them as substandard or unmoral. But within the context of working with children, I think it should, rightly so, always be upfront.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's rule out the obvious.
All right.
You know, you wouldn't put a child at risk and stuff like that. But generally speaking,
when I was 11, I was sexually abused, and that led to addiction and criminality and various other stuff. At the age of 60, I'm now 65, I told my family about that abuse. I hadn't told anyone in 50 years. And I did that so I could then go online and make films. I'm an artist, to encourage children to speak out if they are being abused. But I knew I had to be sensitive for two reasons. One, of political correctness, and two, who am I to judge? I've been on this road now 16 years. I've had that realization probably the last 5 years. But it took me a lot of time, because recovery, rehabilitation, it's a process. It's not an event.
yes.
So realizations are the same. They're not events, they're a process. So from 16 years ago, where I would have had no qualms about talking openly about what I felt, my views have changed because I'm a different person, and I realized that in order for us to ask for forgiveness, we've got to be prepared to give it. And I never used to feel like that before. So that's why I think I'm good at my job now, because I can see.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Gareth, for sharing that. Like, I just love this space, because clearly we create a safe space for people to be really vulnerable and authentic, and that's really important to me, that especially in these discussions, because, you know, how powerful is it for somebody who's experienced sexual abuse to have that perspective around forgiveness, and how healthy do you feel? You feel really healthy to me, for example, in terms of where you're at with that. And yeah, thank you for doing the work that you do. I agree with Craig. Big round of applause for that. Thanks, Gareth. Who had their hand up next? Who else?
Helen next, and the queue's still growing, so it's great that the conversation's flowing so well. So
Go for it, Helen.
Hi. So I work on the Engaging People on Probation project, which is an HMPPS commissioned a piece of work to deliver a culture change within the probation service around how they can better engage with the people that are on their caseloads. And part of that is then potentially being able to offer them employment opportunities within the probation service. The challenge that we come up against, now obviously I am at the extreme end of trying to get somebody with any offence to work for the probation service. You could have nicked £5 out of a till and they probably wouldn't employ you, because they're so risk averse. So I'll be really interested to hear what Yasmin has to say on it, actually, being a probation officer herself. But it is that element of risk. As an organisation, we actively employ people with lived experience, and it doesn't matter what the offence in the background is. It's about having an open and honest conversation and treating that person as an individual, which I think is what is key here. In my previous work, I worked for Working Chance, who support women with convictions to get back into work. You'll know them well, Marie Claire. And they are an organisation that don't discriminate against any woman. It doesn't matter what the offence is. They will try and help. They've recently commissioned, or recently have released, a piece of work around employer attitudes. And the conclusion was, although there is still issues out there, the tide is beginning to change, even with those more serious convictions. But it is about having that individual conversation. So many of these convictions are a massive sliding scale, where at one end you've got, I dropped my cigarette butt on the floor because I was drunk and I set my flat alight, arson. I actively went and poured petrol on a school full of children and lit it, also arson.
Yeah.
But unless you have that conversation, you can't know. People at both ends of the spectrum could be completely reformed, but it's about internally managing that risk in your own organisation to understand what support that person might need, but also what support a line manager might need, for example. in order to make sure that that person is never put in a position where they're at risk or anybody else around them could be at risk. So I think it's very much the key is everybody is a unique individual and there's a unique story, and you just need to understand what that is.
Thank you, Helen. Next
Chloe?
person. I want to get through you all because you've all got amazing points to make.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting conversation, which is why I was so keen to kind of come. I thought I'd logged in and hadn't, but I got here in the end. Obviously, we've said a couple of things that, you know, as organisations who are, well, for myself, for example, working in quite kind of victim heavy spaces at the moment, you know, there are certain things that I would feel were inappropriate. But that doesn't mean as an organisation.
Let's go into that a little bit.
Okay, so if I'm working with, I don't know, let's say a group of people who have been through domestic abuse, I don't necessarily feel that it would be the right decision to make to have somebody who had been convicted of domestic abuse type kind of convictions to work with that group. At some point, maybe. But I think initially, like you said, with children, it's about safety. That doesn't mean that I wouldn't happily take that person into those places and into those environments in some kind of paid capacity, you know, to kind of interact with those people. But when it came to things, it would just be kind of tweaks with job. It would be kind of lone working, potentially, that I would be a little bit concerned about. The same as, like we say, someone who's got sexual offences against children. I don't think many people would think it was appropriate for them to then go and work in a nursery. You know, we're bound slightly.
There's the proportionate thing, isn't there? It's like it has to be a proportionate risk, perception of risk, dependent on the role that we're talking about. But let's just talk about HMPPS then. You know, as a starting point, what messages do we feel that they are giving around certain convictions, such as terrorist offences? Are we saying that people with those offences are not rehabilitatable?
Well, I think that's the issue, isn't it? And that's what really kind of drew me into this event. Is firstly, what does that mean? You know, what does that word? What does rehabilitation mean? You know, in my opinion, and I've tried to do it on slides in presentations, it talks about kind of getting someone to a state that they were previously in before something happened. Well, actually, like if we're being honest, rehabilitation is not necessarily what we want. You know, I start talking about things like transformational justice and transformational whatever, because those interventions are getting you from A to B. Whatever the A and B is, you want them to get from A to B. You don't actually want them to go from B back to A with less understanding, less knowledge, less support, less coping strategies, all of that. You want to get them to a point where they're okay, people around them are okay. You know, but Josh and I always say
part of that is like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it? It's those fundamentals and that progression up the
Absolutely. But you know, we always say if someone is safe enough to be sat on a bus with you, you know, why are we so risk averse? You know, yes, there are certain things from a legal perspective we couldn't do. You know, the disclosure and barring service has automatic barring for certain things for a reason, and it's very difficult to do anything other than that, no matter how forward thinking you are and how much you might like to. You know, I know kind of things like public liability insurance, they would be like, no, we're not going to insure you to have somebody with that conviction working with vulnerable people. But there are so many jobs and areas in which you don't have to necessarily have someone in contact with vulnerable people on a one-to-one basis. There's so much more opportunity, you know, out there, and it's about us starting to try and creating some of those opportunities for people. But actually, you know, giving people that opportunity, like I say, you know, Josh has done it where he's taken, you know, taken someone who had been convicted of murder into a school, you know, because they were supervised and they were there with someone, but they were then able to share, you know, their own story and their own you know, kind of journey. But I say, I don't think a lot of the statutory organisations truly believe in this rehabilitation word, and that's the problem.
Why do you think that's true though? Because if they obviously know the stats, they know that you know, they know that these groups of offences are the least likely to reoffend. They know that more than we do. They've got a Justice Data Lab reoffending stats coming out their ears. So it can't be that, surely. It has to be another reason. Now we know that risk, for example, is measured by the likelihood and the impact, isn't it? I think it's got to be something around the impact, hasn't it? And also, let's be honest, politically, like if and when, it's not an if, it's a when somebody reoffends. And that's the thing, I just had that conversation with one of my staff earlier. We work with people with sex offences and actually any type of offence. It doesn't matter to us. It's how you present in the moment. If you're somebody who's abused children in the past, but you're accountable, you're remorseful, you can disclose that in a suitable way that settles my nerves, you know, we can work with that. If you're a less serious sexual offender, but there's no remorse, no accountability, we will not work with you. I've literally had that conversation with somebody today where I'm like, we can't work with you at the moment, come back if and when you are ready. So we never have a closed door on those people, but it's like, you are not ready, there is no remorse, there's no accountability, I can't put you in forward, can't, you know, knowingly put you forward to one of our employers. But we have employed people that have committed sexual offences and other offences, and actually as a workforce, I would say that particularly sexual offenders are the most compliant, the most generally work ready if their mindset and their confidence is okay, because typically we find that they often need therapy to help them deal with the baggage that they're carrying around, the guilt, that the shame and everything. So yeah, if they are work ready, they actually are quite a reliable workforce in terms of that compliance, that not going anywhere. Has anybody else had experience of you know, working alongside people with those more serious offences or deemed more serious offences?
Shall we go to Philip, Craig and Yasmin first, and then why don't we then move on to that question?
Yeah.
Philip.
Okay, I'm unmuted, and thank you very much for the opportunity of being here today. I fall into one of those categories because I've had lived experience of being in the system. I was 4 years in the system. I'm currently on license. I've been out now for 22 months, and I'm currently working with probation, and I found it difficult to get into work. I was convicted of a sexual offence for something which happened when I was a teenager. I'm in my 50s now, and found it very difficult to gain employment, even if it was through an agency or anything. And I had one of my first interviews after a few days with Amazon, and I disclosed to them, and they said yes, that it won't be a problem. And I started working for them, and this had the approval of probation at the time, and I was working for Amazon for about 6 weeks. And when the DBS came back, they said, you can't work for us now because we have gone through your DBS. And so that was that. It was short-lived at Amazon, and I started doing some self-employment work, became a painter and decorator, and I've since gone on from doing bits and bobs for myself because I want to stay as active as I can, to doing things in the construction sector. I've gone from, in the last 22 months, I've gone from being like an ex-prisoner to becoming self-employed. And then as work picked up, I've gone on and I've started to employ some people as well. I employ 2 people. And if there is if I go and do a quote, for instance, and I know it's a place where there are children present, for instance, I would designate that work to somebody else rather than me doing the job, which eliminates me from, it takes me out of the equation. The company is doing the work, but it's not me doing the work, it's somebody else doing the work. The work that I'm doing with probation at the moment, they are currently getting me into more on the construction side. They enabled me to, through Ixion, they enabled me to get my CSCS card to get onto construction sites so that I could do work there, which is a completely different sector to the domestic side. So I'm able to keep myself busy, but I also have been back into prison twice, not from offending, but as a by going to some success reunions that they were doing at prison, basically to let people know that if you work with the agencies on the outside, life's not too bad. Like, you know, it is workable, and because all you get on the inside are messages from people that have been recalled, that it's not very good, and you know, I never did anything wrong, that kind of thing, and I'm in for breaching my license, etc., for doing nothing. That's all you get. So I went in, and I've been in twice now, and done presentations just to say that that you can make it on the outside. I mean, I'm nothing special, but I am someone with lived experience that can prove that, you know, if you
Rehabilitation,
rehabilitation, none of us can say it now. Rehabilitation, it does work, providing you work with the agencies, and you stick to the boundaries, and it's a two-way street. It's not just expecting all the help and giving nothing back. It's about
so many questions for you, and firstly want to thank you for like just being so open and honest, like really thank you. But so we're talking about HMPPS probation. They're obviously massively risk averse. I mean, we have our clients that we try and get into work, and I find, I'll be honest with you, and I'm generalizing because there are some amazing forward thinking probation officers that again we work really closely with, but generally probation are very risk averse, and they seem to be quite obstructive, especially around sexual offences from what we've gathered. So for example, they'll, you know, I employed somebody that had committed a sexual offence, and his probation officer was quite intrusive just in making sure that he disclosed that, which he had. So I kind of stood up for him around that. But in terms of so this is the thing that's so interesting to me, is that what we're forcing people with sexual offences to do, because we're not giving them any employed opportunities, or because we deem the risk too much, is we're forcing people to go self-employed, which in your instance has been amazing and you're doing great things. But say if you weren't say if you were somebody that wasn't well still, or that still had compulsion or whatever, was still not well, not healed, then who's managing that risk? You know, it's you on your own that's managing your risk, because you're flagging up to probation, you're being open and honest, you're sending other people out to work in scenarios that aren't suitable for you. But, you know, where is the common sense? Where's the logic in that situation?
This is the thing. I'm kind of self-managing my own risk. And I go to probation. It used to be once a week, then once a fortnight, and it's now once a month. If I have any problems, I know they're at the other end of the telephone. But the meetings that I will have, I will tell them how things have been over the last month, and the situations that I've been in, and how I've managed to get one of my employees to do this work because it wasn't deemed suitable for me. And it's almost like, okay, thank you very much for telling us. And if and I've also said to them, although it goes against GDRP, if they wanted to see like my client list and who did the work, etc., then I'm an open book in that respect. But yeah,
but you're writing the client list, aren't you? You're organising that. So
of course,
there's no way of policing that.
No.
Is that? And I'm not saying clearly it's working for you, but there's a disjoint there, isn't there? Because
there is, because there needs to be the structure from when people leave. There needs to be some kind of structure in place to help people with offences that may be a sexual offence, so that as soon as they leave, then there is help to guide people along the way. I used within the first week, I used a company or a charity called Suits for Success in Birmingham. Patricia White was very helpful.
Are you in Birmingham? Are you in Birmingham?
I am, yes.
You'll have to pop in and see us, because we work with Suited for Success. We're in Digbeth, so it'd be great to see you for a couple of days.
Yeah, I may just pop in one morning and grab a coffee off you, and hopefully it's a partnership that, you know, hopefully we could work together on some things. Suits for Success were great because I just had the minimum amount when I came out of prison, which was £47 or whatever it was. They kitted me out for interviews and everything, and I can't thank them enough. And they were one of the charities that kind of got me started up. And whilst I was working for Amazon, I took advantage of their staff discount. This was working through the night, just packing. But working through, whilst I was there, I was getting their staff discount. So I was getting all my painting gear to start with at discount prices, and then doing small jobs like a friend's shed and doing things for friends and family.
Can I ask you, are there any conditions around you being able to employ people with sexual offences? Yeah.
There are conditions. I mean, someone with a sexual offence isn't supposed to knowingly mix with someone that has that kind of offence. It's not.
That's not always the case, Philip.
But it's not. It's not because I am able to DBS an employee, and if there is somebody with a sexual offence, if I know they're going to be working on, say, for instance, a building site, then I know there's going to be no risk to children or anything like that. But I would disclose. I would put that to probation. I would ask them and say, look, someone has approached me for employment, legitimate employment, to work. However, they may have a sexual offence. How would I go on? So I would ask for professional help before I went on to make that offer of employment, for instance.
I mean, that crazy rule around, I mean, I think it's a bit of a blanket licence condition for people with sexual offences, that from what I've seen, and I know we're focusing on...
It never was for me, Marie-Claire.
Was it not? Okay.
And I went straight in, you know, as you know, I've always maintained my innocence, and I went straight into providing support for other people in the same boat. So I was mixing with a lot of people with certain convictions and their families. And that licence condition was never prevalent. It isn't always present, you see.
So we had I attend the reducing reoffending meetings in Birmingham, and I think you were lucky, Adam, probably potentially, because even the police themselves said it is a bit of a blanket licence condition, even if you haven't colluded with, even if your sexual offence had nothing to do with other people, there was no collusion, there was no, you know, sharing data or pictures or anything. Typically it will say something around you can't mix with people, but then you look at the prison wings that people are on, the VP wings, and everybody's banded together. You look at the HMOs and the supported, you know, probation hostels, everybody's banded together. And actually I did a Twitter call out. I was supporting somebody who'd raped a little girl, actually, over a period of years, and he had found work and stuff, and I was working with a prison, I think it was over Onley Way, Rye Hill. It was Rye Hill prison, where they house a lot of sexual offenders. And they were saying, you know, these guys have got no hope, similar to what you were saying, Philip. These guys have got no hope. They think there's nothing out there waiting for them. And it was like, actually, we could take this guy into a motivational. Carla, you okay to just put yourself on mute?
It was quite surreal. But when I've got white noise coming in.
Carly, I think, is it Carly? Carly. Thank you.
My first kind of success reunion, which I was invited by the education team at Stafford, because they kept in touch with me for a period of a few months after release, just to see how you're getting on and if there's any support that they can give education wise. And I went back for a success reunion, which was 364 days after release, and it felt quite surreal because I was able to go back and say to them, this time last year I was sitting exactly where you were sitting because I was a prisoner, and to me I was kind of boring them to tears. But when I spoke to the governor and some of the
Ralph.
It wasn't Ralph. I do know Ralph, but he's now moved on to Huel. It was oh crikey, I can't remember his name now.
But he went from Swinfen Hall to Stafford, didn't he?
He did, and Ralph was very good, and you could see change whilst he was there. You could see change happening whilst he was there. The new governor, he said, as I was talking, I was some of the residents or prisoners were saying, were looking at each other and nodding, and because I gave them a no-nonsense approach to how it was on the outside, and he said, did you notice that they were kind of nodding in appreciation, so that when I had finished this presentation, I got a standing ovation, and it was like, I just didn't know what to do because I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting them all to fall asleep, but it was completely,
yeah.
It was, yeah.
If what we're concerned as an organisation with is obviously helping people to lead happy, healthy, successful lives and self-actualise. Like, it's always about Maslow's hierarchy of needs for me. Thank you. But we don't seem to offer that to all categories of offences, do we? And that's what you're doing. You're kind of shining a light on that. I think we're going to need to go to some other speakers.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Philip. We'll come back though.
We've got Craig and we've got Yasmin, and then we'll move on to Frankie. Hello, Craig.
Hi. Thanks very much. My name's Craig Phillips. I've first of all, just thanks so much for that last contribution. It was really powerful. So thank you enormously. I'm here really. I chair a business called HM Pasties, which some of you might have heard of. It's in the northwest, founded by a chap called Lee Wakeham, who served time in prison. And I was listening with interest to the conversation because we have a slightly unusual approach in that most of the people that Lee wants to work with are serving longer sentences. I think he's very aware of that being a gap, if you like, which the system at the moment doesn't really address. But equally, he's had he's had experience at the victim end of sexual offending, which is very open about, but that makes him sort of preclude the idea of having people with sex offences in the business. I personally would, because
he won't have because of his personal experiences.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think it's just too much for him.
He's not on his own with that.
But I think my hope is that over time, particularly in the bit of the business which we have a foundation as well that does pre-employment stuff as well with people, that we do cross over into that area, because I think, as Philip said, that there are people who basically merit and need these opportunities. I think if you are coming out of that kind of offence and sentence, if the whole world is closed off to you, what on earth you know, what on earth do you do? There has to be some opportunities, and somebody's got to offer them and live with, you know, whatever risks. I think, Marie, you know, you said quite clearly that, you know, is it and that Marie Claire, sorry,
everyone gets it wrong. It's a mouthful.
Don't worry, sorry, my fault. Marie Claire said that the risk of offending is relatively low in those groups, and I think that's something that people don't really understand at all, and that in sort of, you know, in environments where there aren't vulnerable others, then there should be no issue really at all around employing people with sexual offences, and you know, the truth is that there are more people in custody now with sexual offences, and we have to offer something on the rehabilitation side, employment wise, because if we don't, who's going to do that?
Absolutely. It becomes ethical at that point, not just to the person who's being ostracised from society for the whole of their life potentially, but also to the potential future victims. Because if we do isolate people, most of the sexual offenders that I've spoken to, when you deep dive in, you know, whether it's online, you know, online images or through to the more serious offences, it's happened due to isolation, depression, often caregiver responsibilities, you know, lack of job being, you know, it's all those things, trigger points that we're creating when they come back out into society with the added shame and stigma of the label.
Yes.
Which for me,
so it increases risk rather than
exactly. So are there any probation officers in the room? Just because I've got a question around the self-employment thing, would probation officers have any power? Say if I'm a sexual offender and I want to set up my own business, and actually my offence was, you know, just a few years ago, would probation have any powers to stop me from setting up my own business?
That moves it nicely on to Yasmin, who's next, who's got a hand up next.
Hi Yasmin, and you may not know the answer, and it's fine. I'm just interested in that element, because if we're talking about risk, self-employment completely negates that.
Yeah, hi, I'm Yasmin. I'm sitting and listening to everybody, and I feel really embarrassed now. I thought, oh my God, they've been talking about probation, and you know, I'm like, but obviously, I myself was ex-offender, actually now working as a probation officer. So, and I still kind of find it difficult to the way the things are, because when we were privatised as CRC, it was more kind of relaxed, and it was more kind of, there were more to taking on ex-offenders into probation. But because now it's all gone back to National Probation Service, it's kind of changed again. They're really kind of bit, you know, about taking on ex-offenders onto probation, and so it's like
I know
before.
I know a lot of people like yourself though that have been in the system that are now working in for probation. The problem is they can't talk about it really. It's like all hush hush.
This is the thing, because this is what I'm saying. When I was at CRC, I was working in town in Centre City, and my video was
Were you a peer mentor to start with?
Yeah, so I started off. Sorry,
I remember you. I think.
Yeah, because I started off when I come out, I was in Coventry, I was in probation there, and my probation officer, actually, you know, he was really good, and he says to me, they're doing there's this company in Birmingham called Use the Voice. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I used to work for them.
Yeah, so yeah, he said that, oh, you know, they take on ex-offenders, and they work in prisons and stuff, you know, would you be interested? And I was like, yeah, I jumped on it. I was like, yeah, definitely put me through. And then I kind of moved to Birmingham, and I was doing some training with them. So it's really good. So we got to go into prisons and everything. And then I came to Birmingham probation, and I found out they were doing peer mentoring. And I was like, oh, this is something, you know, I never even thought even then that I'd ever get a job as a probation officer. I thought, oh, peer mentoring, maybe I can help, you know, other people and just do like support stuff. So I've done the peer mentoring and everything. And then eventually a job did come up as a support worker, and I applied for it, and I got in, and I was like, I'm actually working here. I was a support worker, but not probation, but working in Birmingham city centre. It was so good. I loved my job because I was actually engaging with people like in the same situation as me, and I was helping them and taking them to organisations, and like if they had drugs issues, mental health issues, you know, going and making connections with those organisations. And it was so good because you were working hand on hand with these people that were in the similar position as you. But you know, and then CRC then was going back to National Probation Service, and I thought, oh God, you know, I'm going to get sacked now because they're not going to take on, you know, an ex-offender, because they're like red tapes is like everything. And I thought, you know what, and I was just, I don't know how, but I literally, when we moved over, you know, they said to me, oh, do you want a job as a probation? And I was like, really, you're offering me a job? You know. And they said yeah, and I became a probation service officer, and I work with obviously young adults. I'm in the young adults team, and I work with 18 to 25-year-olds. But obviously, it's when I come over here, it was a lot different because I didn't disclose my offence to anybody, because nobody really asked about it. It was only recently, because I was booked to see my nephew in prison who's serving the sentence, and they you know, because they got Oakwood's privatised, isn't it? And they've got like their separate, is it G4S running that prison. So when he first went in, I was actually visiting him. Everything was fine. There was no issues. But because he was out on a license and then he went back in again, he booked my visit. But he goes, Auntie, I went onto the portal because you have to go onto the pods and book people on. He goes, the red flags come up for you. And I goes, what? And he goes, oh, red flags come up for you saying that, oh, because you're a convicted criminal that you can't come in to see him. And I was like, what the hell? You know, because I'm a probation officer now, and still that's come up. But and then, so obviously then I spoke to my regional manager. I said, look, I need to bring this up because obviously, because my vetting was going on, and so I had to declare like the offences if I know anybody in the criminal justice system. So I gave them all my nephew's names and date of birth and everything like that. But then I thought, hold on, this red flag's come up. I don't know why it's come up and what's going on. So then I had to then like let somebody know. So then I spoke to the regional manager. I said, look, this is going on, but I don't know what, you know, what's exactly going on, because there's never an issue before. I've been to Huel, I've been to Brinsford, you know, I've been to, like, when I was working for User Voice, like we went to loads of prisons and there's never been an issue. And even as a probation officer, I've been to Birmingham to Winson Green prison, you know, and I've seen like some of my pops there, my offenders, and there's never been an issue. So now this red flags raised, I want to know what's it about, you know. So he said, all right, then he goes, look, I'll look into it. And then we've got all our teams, we've got different teams and we've got our own kind of managers. So then I had to speak to my manager, because my old manager, she knew about my offence and everything, because like, she's seen me from the beginning of my journey, but my new one, she didn't. So I had to then disclose it to her, and it was quite difficult because MPS is always like, you know, a bit kind of, you don't know how to like come out and disclose it because their rules are different to the way CRC, as I said, CRC was really relaxed, and MPS, they're more about, you know, risks and about red tape and all this kind of stuff. So I was a bit, but she was quite understanding, and she didn't like really say anything. She goes, you know, like, you know, you're working here now, everything's fine. But
so in terms of the well, not even just sexual offence, in terms of those other categories of offences, I mean, you've obviously had issues yourself in terms of, I suppose, like you've had barriers come up and, you know, the red flag and stuff. But in terms of the red flags that are around certain categories of offences, and you're in probation, how do you feel that they treat people with those categories of offences? Do they see them as being able to desist and to change their lives, or is there a constant?
Because I think it's like kind of, I don't know how to say it, because some officers, the old school officers, they're more relaxed now with change and everything. But I find that we've got loads of new officers come in as P-Quips, so they train up to become probation officers, like, because I'm a PSO, probation service officer, so we only deal with low and medium risk, and the ones that are training to deal with high risk offenders, they have to do the P-Quip. And I find that they like rush to do it because they think that because the money's more and, you know, they get paid more and everything. But some of them I see are really struggling because they have to work with high risk offenders, and they're really, like, some of the girls are in tears, like, oh, the guy's been stalking me, the guy's doing this, but they don't know how to manage it because they're still training. So I mean, like you're saying, to how it's a bit of a, like a, I don't know how to say it, but it's kind of some yes and some no. You know, some officers.
Would a person that have committed a sex offence, regardless of the severity of that offence, be able to set up their own business? Is there any way probation can obstruct that?
Probably could. It all depends on what job they're doing, what you know, what are their offence and how high the risk is in the public. So it's all, again, like you say, it's all to do
How
with
would they stop it though, How would they stop it, Yasmin? Would they brief
basically
the person?
they'd probably call them in and say to them first, look, we're your probation officer and we think that this wouldn't be suitable for you. And then they'll probably say, look, you can't do this. But if the person went against them, then they probably what first they do is because first of all, when somebody comes out of prison now, see, before it was a bit relaxed, but I think the rules have gone a bit more stricter because now everybody that comes out, even if he's got like a really low risk offence, like say if it's just a minor driving offence, they still now want us to do police checks, safeguarding checks, social services, police, everything, intel.
Why though? What's the rationale for that? Surely it's just a burning money exercise.
You know what, if I knew, I'd come and share it with you, but I haven't got a clue why they've just putting all these risks and risks and risks and risks. It's like I said, because I've just one of my guys actually, he wants to actually become, you know, work as a probation, and I said, because you know what, a couple of years ago I probably would have said to you yes, but now with everything changing, it's kind of going back to the old way where they were really judgmental of, you know, ex-offenders and people that want to come and work for probation. I said to him, but I can find out there's other organizations, hence yourselves, you know, that will probably like maybe to take, you know, find you a suitable job. This was because we've had like a launch day today. We had organizations in, and I think I spoke to, I don't know if it's you, Adam, or somebody else, because I remember I keep getting emails of yourselves about jobs, but the jobs are all based like really far out in like London, Leeds. So I think I emailed, I'm not sure if it was an Adam or, so it was you. Yeah, and I spoke to you, didn't I, about like the, you know, we need more jobs in the Midlands, and I didn't even know from your colleague that that you've got a base in Birmingham. You know, otherwise I would have come to your office.
I'd love to touch base with you actually. In fact, come to my office. Love to see you and Philip. Because
what time are you open to? Because I've got training tomorrow actually in town in Centre City. I've got and it finishes at 4. So
I'm not in tomorrow. I'm working from home, but I'm in on Thursday. I'm not in. Friday I'm in if you're about. But especially about our traineeship program for 19 to 24-year-olds, it's really powerful.
You know what, that'll be absolutely brilliant because we struggle, because the young guys, they struggle to get into work, and they said there's nothing out there for us. There, you know, we can't get into the only job that's offered. I mean, no disrespect to like Tim's and the railway and Greg's and that, because I remember when I was at Draco, they were offering me the job for Greg's, and I was like, okay, yeah, it's like, but I was like, it's not really something I want to do.
It's not really aspirational thinking, is it? No offense, it's great for some people, but actually,
yeah, like you're saying, because I was more motivated to helping other people that being in a similar situation as myself.
Yeah, definitely. Let's touch base next week. I just want to
bring
it. I know
that answer the question what was raised before. I've actually dug my old license out from 2018 when I got out.
Really?
Yeah. Now, you know, I do keep a hold of paperwork. Now, one of the conditions where it comes to employment and everything, which is fairly generic to a lot of people, is not undertake work or a particular type of work unless it is approved by the supervising officer and notify the supervising officer in advance of any proposal to undertake work or a particular type of work. Now, all the templates are there anyway because the things have to be worded correctly. Now, all I did was I just went in, I just threw a business plan on the table and said, right, that's what I'm going to do. I need your approval before I pick things off, you know?
Yeah, sometimes you have to be a bit blunt and direct with them, because sometimes I feel like a lot of the officers are like, have that bit of a power trip that, you know,
it's not just that, Yasmin. When you think about it, when you're dabbling with your freedom as well, you have to be sort of subjective and actually state things. There's no point implying things. You know, you actually want things to be in black and white terminology at the end of the day, so that then everybody knows where they do stand and don't.
Exactly, but this is it. They keep changing every other, you know, they keep bringing new rules, taking away some, bringing, and you're like, you know, be something that you can actually be stuck in. Because at the end of the day, like say if you came to me and you're saying, Yasmin, right, I might want to approve it, but then I have to speak to my manager, and then my manager will have to go to the regional manager.
Yasmin, can I just ask you a bit? But can I just ask you a bit about the processes? Because there's obviously that, in terms of employment, for example, there's a rule in the PSI which says probation can, you know, request that you disclose, and they can enforce that if it's proportionate to your offence and the job that you're applying for. So there's obviously a grey area there that's, you know what I mean, like up for discussion. How do people challenge it? Say if you're an unhelpful or an obstructive probation officer, and I'm trying to progress my life, you've said no, I don't think that business is suitable, or you can't go for that job because it's just deemed unsuitable. What do I do if I really believe, like Philip, that I've got something, and I've got something
challenge it.
Positive to offer? How do you challenge it?
Basically, then you ask to speak to the regional manager. So not
who do you ask your probation officer?
Yeah, so listen, right, so I understand where you're coming from, but I would really like to speak to your manager.
Yeah,
so every team has,
but try getting them to actually put you in contact with them.
Oh, it's our
I mean, I've done this.
From experience, Guy, I always found it better, Gareth, to actually put it in writing. The deputy
I think
director of the probation division, and then you actually escalate to stage 2 to the director. But that always works.
Adam, didn't I, when I was emailing you, when we emailed back forward, I did say to you that we've got a launch day today, but I think you were saying that you're quite far out, wasn't it?
I'm up here in Newcastle, but Marie Claire, and the rest of the team on Birmingham,
Yeah, because I
just want to go back to Gareth,
anybody in Birmingham that, then I would have asked you to come down, and today would have been a great opportunity to come and bring your leaflets and everything. But I think because you were having your event as well, weren't you, too? But you should have really come down. It would have been good, because then obviously you would have to raise your,
well, keep in touch with us, and anything like that we'll come to. But want to go back to Gareth. Gareth, you said that you've tried to challenge some decisions around with your probation officer. Can we just
yeah, quite a few. So, I mean, I had one that just blank told me there was absolutely no mechanism whatsoever to challenging what she said. Another time I find out that there was a process of going around, but again, like the person I was complaining about was the gatekeeper to the information I needed to contact him. You see what I mean? So every time I've tried to complain, there's either been literally no complaint mechanism, or there's effectively been no complaint mechanism because the person who is meant to be putting me in touch doesn't want me to complain about it.
So I saw on Twitter there's Rainbow Girl, who is the partner of a convicted sex offender, and I saw a tweet that she put on, so I reached out to her just because I'm always interested in this. So she said that her partner is on the SOR register. He got a job. Probation said they had to speak to HR regarding his conviction. He went and printed off all the guidance off the PSI regarding licence conditions around disclosure. He quoted what it said around proportionality and the need to disclose given the role itself, and the offender manager eventually backed down, which is a great success story. However, it's still not very process driven, is it? Like you said, Gareth, there's no kind of safe mechanism. I mean, Philip's just put Frankie's put a really pertinent, comment on the chat, which is upon that request comes a recall request, and it's that. How do you challenge the people that ultimately are in charge of your freedom? How do you do that?
So the thing is, with people think that the people think that the recall process is so easy. Like if I said, oh, I'm going to recall someone, I have to approve it then by my manager, and then my manager has to then approve it by the right team, like it's not something that I say I'm going to recall, that's it, it's recall, because when it goes to the courts, they will look as well at why you are recalling, what are the offences, and what have they been complying with their order. If that person's now going to probation all the time, doing all the right things, and they won't accept the recall, because I've known breaches and recalls to come back because the courts have not accepted it because they have not had a valid reason. So, I don't know about in other areas, but Birmingham, that's where I work. It started like I had to breach a guy once, but I was like, hold on, this guy doesn't really need to be. So I went to my manager and I said, look, that the police have called me and they want to breach him straight away. They want to, and I said, but the thing is, like, what's the process? Because when I was newly in the service, and they have to go high up and ask them like what the process is. You can't just because the police have contacted you now, says somebody's committed offence, that breach them, because now you have to make sure that you have to see what the criteria is, see if it was just a little driving offence, then no, because unless it was a serious offence, like basically you've accidentally might have killed someone while you're on probation or accidentally injured someone, then they'll think about it. Even then, there's loads of paperwork to go through and you've got to make sure you are meeting the right criteria, that you're not going to get breached or recalled just because you committed, or if you want to do something, and then your officer, because your officer can't just breach you yourself, because they have to go to their regional, to their manager, the team manager, and then the team manager then has to approve it, and then get their regional managers to approve it. So, you know, it's, you know, people think, oh, we get breached straight away. That's, it's not the process, because I'm, you know, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that, oh,
No,
you know what I mean?
no, and this is why I love these discussions, because it does kind of give a bit more perspective around what's going on behind the scenes. I still don't know if I fully believe. I'd like to know how many suggested breaches and recalls are actioned as that, and I suspect it's quite high. I can't see many powers that be going against the probation officers that have had dealings with somebody saying, actually, I don't think you're, you know, I don't agree with you. I think actually, on the whole, probation are just so risk averse.
Yeah, so yeah, I think we'll have to arrange for yourself to come and meet with Mark.
I'll make contact with you out of here. Has anyone? Frankie's had his hands up patiently for ages now. Frankie, talk to us.
All right. Well, yeah, going back to all sorts. Amazon, from what Philip was saying, approximately 18 months ago, I applied there in front of a group of the rest of the people that were applying, obviously filling out my application form. Have you got any convictions? I ticked the yes. If yes, what convictions? Because of my convictions, I didn't want to write them down, so I didn't. When she's seen I ticked yes, she pulled me up. She says, what's your convictions? I disclosed I had a sexual offence, and everybody in that room got an invite back, a date for an invite back, barring me. I left that room with no date to come back, which was obviously awkward, because on the bus journey home with two of the lads, they're both going, oh, I'm starting on the 4th, I'm starting on the 17th, when are you starting? And I'm sat there going, I haven't got one. Do you know what I mean? So, like I say, now, because of my mental illness and obviously my conviction, I've told the job centre I've stopped applying for jobs. What's the point in me going to look for a job when, as soon as I say I got a sex offence, the door's closed?
Frankie, in terms of that,
point. So rehabilitation is for the select few.
Frankie, in terms of what that does to you as somebody who's really trying to get his foot on the ladder and make positive changes and be more pro-social, which is what we want. I mean, even victims of sexual offences I would guarantee they would say their main priority is that the perpetrator doesn't offend again. So we know that work makes you almost 50% less likely to reoffend straight away. Do you know what I mean? If we're talking about reducing reoffending, jobs are one of the main pre-indicators of that. But what did it do to you in terms of your risk? And when I say risk, I mean your vulnerability when you got that knockback.
I've spent a period battling with my mental health. I've just come through what I call a deep rest phase rather than a depression phase, where I spent about 4 months in my flat without venturing outside. But it demotivates me now, like has been previously said. I've been discussing this with Adam last week, seeking to go self-employed. I want to start a business to get homeless people off the streets and like offer them accommodation. And there's plenty of empty hotels and plenty of empty buildings about town that can be converted for such a purpose. Do you know what I mean? But I want to offer it to people. I don't want to exclude anybody, like say Swan Lodge. You've got to be over 35. If you've got if you've got an arson conviction, they won't take you in. So
let's talk about that. Let's talk about the arson, because I had a conversation about this earlier, because I'm a bit like you. Sorry, what was your name? Frankie. I'm a bit like you. I'm like, we should accept everybody, but then you come down to the nuts and bolts stuff. So with arson, for example, let's talk about housing and arson, the arson charge. Your insurance is null and void if you take in somebody with that conviction. You will never find an insurer that will allow you running an HMO or a house of multiple occupancy to have an arsonist within your property. If you do choose to do that, that's fine, but you'd have no insurance. And if they did actually, do anything in terms of set a fire and somebody else was injured or hurt, like you'd be in a whole world of hell. So how do we get past like that level of obstruction?
Well, that's down to your risk assessment, that person's risk assessment. Like you said, when an ex-offender comes for a job interview with you, you don't judge them on their offence, you judge them by what they see and do in that interview. And if you think they're ready, then you employ them. Well, that mantra goes through to the same with somebody, like giving somebody with arson a chance to think, right, why did you do it? What have you learned from it? Do you know what I mean? Right, how long have you been on the streets for? Has that taught you a lesson? Do you know what I mean? And you judge each individual by like how they present themselves, rather than going, oh, you've got arson, well, I can't take it because that nullifies me insurance. Do you know what I mean? Instead of saying that, right?
But let's not brush over that. Let's not brush over that, because that's actually a pretty big.
Yeah. I know, but then, like,
I mean, that's a wall.
If you brought that up in like the interview process, if you said to that arsonist, look, I can't take you in because you then nullify my insurance, and if anything happens, I cannot claim, so it's out of my own pocket. Like, that's the risk I take if I give you a room in my property. Now, what assurances are you going to give me that I can take this risk? Do you know what I mean? And like I say, you're just going to have to judge it on like a person by person thingy. Do you know what I mean? You
can't just to let you know as well, Philip's happy to,
do you know what I mean?
Just to let you know, Philip, sorry, just to let you know, Frankie, that Philip's offering to like, I suppose, mentor you a little bit, or give you some of his experiences of setting up his own business, especially with like those convictions and stuff. So you two should definitely
I'll put my email in the chat for him in a minute, so once I finish speaking. But certainly, because I said to Adam last week that I haven't got a clue where to go about funding. I know there's loads of different fundings and available and whatnot, and like grants to get business properties and stuff like that. So I sort of know bits and pieces, but I just don't know collectively how to start it all. So yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Philip. But yeah, like back on the subject, like I say, so that's my personal experience, and like I say, it's Amazon thingy, and with the cut, like 12 years cuts of Tory funding, Tory cuts, sorry. What Yasmin said about the experience, like leaving, you can't replace Neymar with somebody from the under-16s. That experience has left. You cannot train your new trainees like lived experience from a college textbook. Do you know what I mean? So these older, more experienced probation officers, I'm lucky I had one. He was brilliant. They should be there to pass down like lived experience onto the next generation, because you cannot teach how to handle a high risk offender, for example, from a textbook. Do you know what I mean? And you can only learn that from somebody that's got experience of that. Do you know what I mean? So like I say, you can't replace Neymar with somebody from your under 16s, because it's not going to work. And that's the problem with probation at the moment.
Hi guys, sorry, could I just interrupt? I brought one of our managers in. Hopefully,
hello, Jem. Hello, Jem.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
So I pulled her in to maybe answer the questions I couldn't answer. So she's.
I've got to go and get my charger because my laptop's about to die. So carry on, and I'll be back shortly.
Whilst we're on the subject of insurance, I've got a motor trade policy in place, and it's anybody who's under my employ is able to drive any vehicles which either belong to me or which are under my care. However, if anybody has a unspent conviction, I do need to let the underwriter know who sorts things out. And all I've ever noticed is that the level of excess has changed on my policy. I mean, I've got a very helpful broker who lives local to me, who's actually been a great help and source of support. But sometimes you think, well, hang on, do people often hide behind the cloak of being unable to get insurance sometimes, you know?
Gemma, I want to come to you because obviously you're Yasmin's manager. One of the conversations that we had was around obviously risk. Why do HMPPS, for example, have that blanket ban on employing people with convictions, especially if they've got sexual convictions, arson, murder, terrorism offences, when actually, like the first two that I mentioned, sexual offences and murder, are statistically the least likely to reoffend. We just wondered like what the stance was on that.
So the stance is there is no blanket ban on anybody working.
No, not working. Sorry, not working in general, but working for HMPPS. There's like, if you've heard of the Giphy jobs, for example, they're going forward into employment.
Yeah.
There's a blanket ban on certain criteria of offences, the ones that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
And we just that comes from HMPPS ultimately in the public sector. When we just wondered why. What is that based on? Is it a political thing in terms of if and when somebody does reoffend, that it would just be so bad politically that the whole world will come crashing down, or is it based on something else that we're not privy to?
So in terms of politically, I can't really answer whether it's a political affiliation with some kind of party, because I genuinely don't know. I think it would just depend on what offence is deemed as high risk or not high risk, and what offence is deemed as appropriate to hire somebody. I'm not sure whether it's a complete blanket ban, because we've had people that have been working for certain sectors that have got sex offences and violent offences. But I think it would come from a government perspective to say, actually, these people can work for us, these people can't work for us. The answer to the question is, I actually don't know the answer.
I think that's the problem, isn't it? It's like HMPPS, in my view, right? Your whole business is around rehabilitation and desistance. If you're then separating certain criteria of offences out of that rehabilitative, element, what you're saying to the rest of society is these people, you shouldn't employ them. So we know that employment reduces reoffending.
Absolutely.
So then, isn't that, for me, and I'm sure you feel the same. I'm not criticising you. I know you guys are on the same page as us, but it just seems really bizarre in terms of what we're trying to achieve, and then the barriers that we're hitting with certain offences.
So I've been having this conversation today that we should realistically practice what we preach. And if, for example, someone has got a domestic violence offence, that doesn't mean they're going to be a domestic violence offender for the rest of their lives, for example.
Let me give another example of that. My FD committed high-level fraud, 4.4 million. I trust him with my life, and I trust him with my business's finances, because I know he's rehabilitated. He's the most trustworthy person I've ever met in my life. So if we don't do that to him, why would we do it to somebody that had committed a sex offence?
I think sex offences are classed as such a risky, and I know they're probably statistically the least likely to reoffend, but they're so risky in terms of the impact and how it would seem if we let a sex offender work with other offenders and then they committed a further offence. I guess the optics, which is a crappy thing to think about, but the optics wouldn't look very positive.
But then we've got the Metropolitan Police, for example, who had one in there. Do you know what I mean? It's like, come on, better the devil you know is my opinion on this. It's like, we know your risks, we can manage that, but actually you can't manage the risk of somebody that hasn't been caught out, hasn't been taken to court. It's crazy.
Absolutely. I think the only thing I can sort of say is that I can speak to our PDU head and ask him why there is certain classes of offences that preclude people from working for HMPPS. He may be able to.
Could we ask people in the group chat, if you've got a question, Jem, I really appreciate you agreeing to take that back for us, because I think I've definitely got a couple of questions that I'd like to ask. For example, and we're focusing on SOs, but actually it's wider than that, but particularly in terms of sexual offences, I think what we find is there's a lot of generic licence conditions that we've already spoke about, such as you can't mix with other people you can't knowingly mix with other people that have committed sex offences, even if your crime had nothing to do with colluding or, grooming in a group or anything like that. There's just almost a generic kind of licence condition. One of the other things that we were discussing was around self-employment. And, you know, if people keep getting doors shut in their face, like Philip really had a powerful session earlier where he was saying, you know, he kept having doors shut in his face. He was working for Amazon. He disclosed his prehistoric sexual offence. They took him on. 6 weeks later, the DBS came back and they sacked him on the spot.
How historic was historic?
Like from when he was a teenager, and he's now in his 50s, I think, late 40s, 50s. But I was being kind then.
To me, that wouldn't preclude him from working for certain people if it was done literally 30 years ago. That's.
But then, so then what Philip's done, and obviously he's low risk anyway, you can tell that from, he's set up his own business, where actually what we discovered was he's managing his own risk, because he's going into domestic properties. If there are children in that property, he's kind of logging it all and getting somebody else to do that work for him. But all that probation require are Philip's say so on what he's done and how he's managed that. There's no actual policing of that risk or anything. So what we were saying is, it seems to be that HMPPS inadvertently are kind of increasing the risk ultimately by putting these onerous like license conditions and obstructions in front of people, forcing them to potentially go down the self-employed route, where they're then, like Philip, managing their own risk, which he's doing really, really well, by the way, but potentially some other people may not. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions that they'd like Jem to take back to HMPPS or probation, MPS, I think if you just whack it in the chat, and then what we'll do is we'll collate them all, and hopefully we can get some answers, because I'd really love to escalate this conversation and discussion in terms of like what we've all been talking about. I just want to go to Chloe, if that's all right, because she had a hand up for
before we move on to Chloe, it was interesting you bringing up the GIFI vacancies, Mary Claire, because we share numerous going forward into employment vacancies on behalf of HMPPS. We've met online with people fairly senior within HMPPS to discuss the sharing of vacancies. I get the vacancies sent directly to me, which we share. If necessary, I'll go through the criteria and submit the expression of interest form along with a candidate's CV. So therefore, I'm good enough to recruit for HMPPS, but not eligible to apply for the vacancies. So it's rather ironic, really, and a little bit two-faced of His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service.
I think for me, the thing that I find a little bit hypocritical is HMPPS trying to shoehorn people into work, really like coming straight out of prison, because work helps to reduce reoffending, but then not practicing what they preach. For me, that just smacks of like, why would society do something that you're not willing to do yourself? And that's why we practice what we preach, because it's like, if we're not going to employ people with all categories of offences, why should we expect you to as an employer? Like, just bizarre practice. Chloe?
Yeah, I just wanted to come in really when you were talking about arson as an arsonist. You know, there is lots of complexity. Mary Claire, I think obviously you'll know, but my conviction, for anyone who doesn't know me, was a suicide attempt. So I tried to end my life by starting a fire and ended up with an arson charge. No previous contact with the criminal justice system before that, long history of mental health issues. I'd been asking the mental health team for support and all of that kind of stuff, but you know, as has been said earlier, you know, arson is arson. It doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter what the context is.
One offence of arson, Chloe, one instance.
Yep. So just that one incident, nobody else was harmed, nobody else was there. There was obviously damage to the property, which was co-owned, which is why it was even though my partner didn't want to press charges, it was co-owned, so it was seen as kind of damage. You know, but there are ways of doing things, because I've done it. I've been in 2 properties as a renter. Interestingly, the first set of people never even asked the question, because I was able to pay the full amount, so they didn't do any credit checks or anything like that, which I thought was quite interesting, that they didn't even ask me. That apparently wealth means that I'm not likely to be a risk.
Which is probably how society works as well. I think you can buy yourself out of that risk status, can't you, if you're high up enough the ladder, let's be honest.
Yeah, that's it. It's obviously we'd sold the property that was damaged, and therefore we had the cash, so I could pay. But the impact on general insurances is, you know, I felt that like big time. My car insurance, even for like 4 years, was like $2,500 a year, for me to insure a £600 car, which seemed odd. Contents insurance and stuff like that is massively impacted. The excesses on everything are high. You know, like I can't make a claim for anything less than about £500, I think, because it's pointless.
When does it become spent, Claire?
It's been spent.
Well, then you don't need to declare it.
No, but they've already got the information, and because that information ends up being declared in the ether as such, because you have to declare it up to a certain point, then it's still kind of held there in the background. And the companies, what I found is that even without the conviction, they can ask you about loss. So even though they're not legally allowed to say, do you have a spent conviction, they can say, in the last 10 years, for example, have you had a loss of, you know, a loss due to X, Y, or Z?
Yeah.
So they kind of get around it. So you know,
you've got to wait for that 10-year period before you're kind of out of the.
Yeah. So say the car insurance, I think, was 5 years, even though my conviction only lasted 2.5, I think, or 3 years before it was spent. So I had an extra 2 years on car insurance. But you know, these things are kind of, they are possible, but it is complex. I don't doubt that it's not complex, but you know, it kind of, it's a similar situation, I guess, as to what Philip was saying about something. You know, you can't necessarily know the risk of something based just on what that charge is, because that, you know, the kind of background information, but that's what the system doesn't really allow for. It doesn't allow for that. I put in the chat box about kind of grading of some of these things. Not, again, I'm still not saying that there should be a hierarchy, but something like, I don't know, a 17-year-old having sex with their 15-year-old partner, or they've been together since one of them was 13 and one of them was 15, and then they stay together, like that. Although legally that would be seen as not okay, I think most people would probably not judge that quite the same as, you know, some of the kind of other things that we see. But there's nothing for that in our system. It's still very black and white. We don't have that ability to kind of, I don't know, demonstrate something. So like on a DBS, obviously it will just come up with the event, not any of the other stuff. And I think maybe that's something that kind of as a sector, you know, we could be. What,
disclosure support, you mean? More disclosure. Yeah. To be honest with you, that's a big area that we support in. And it is really important. Like it's actually everything, I think, because what we see is people with all levels of offences managing to get into work because of the way they communicate. And if you're not doing that quite right, like you are just going to get doors slammed in your face. And if there's any minimisation whatsoever, like it just makes, and understandably, it makes employers run for the hills. We went forward, and like I said earlier, had a person with sexual offences earlier where I had to just say, no, like you minimised, you've actually just lied to me about the offences that you've committed and not having any previous. Like I can't in good conscience put you forward for a role when I know you're not rehabilitated, whatever that, you're not fully healed is how I put it and how I feel. Edmund, can we go to you because you've had your hand up patiently?
One thing in my personal rehabilitation, an issue I constantly come across is my dyslexia, because we live in a world now like this meeting, it's online. It's really difficult for me, but I found coping strategies, but sometimes I miss meetings because I just can't deal with the information that's being asked of me. And in the world we live in now, most things are done online. So I found that one of the biggest barriers, because all the other barriers I could overcome through determination and whatever, and by gaining credibility with distance from my past. Dyslexia has always been the issue, and it's as much an issue now. 12% of our population is roughly dyslexic, about 4% is diagnosed. You go into prisons with learning disabilities and neurodivergency, it's up to 80% of the population. So how we engage with people who are already in the system and can't communicate through normal means. And normal means now, every day, by the very fact that we're all on this meeting, is dealing with the information highway. So I just want to get that in before the end of the meeting. I think neurodivergency and learning disabilities are a big asset to rehabilitation.
Thanks, Edmund. So in terms of questions that we want to pose to probation, NPS and potentially HMPPS themselves, and are there any burning questions that you all have? Gareth just had a really important point in the chat as well around, you know, I didn't understand the first bit around there's got to be some middle ground. Okay, what you're saying is like the risk aversion versus the inclusion argument, I think.
Yeah, there's a bit of an echo chamber here, isn't there? Like, we all want everyone to have a chance at getting better here, but like, we've also got to understand that Joe Public have got like
concerns,
you know, mainly prescribed by the media and stuff, but they've got their own fears and stuff. Do you know what I mean? And like, I'm aware of that when I'm around people who know my past. Do you know what I mean? So it's up to me to sort of go the extra step to make sure people don't feel threatened and stuff, you know. But you know, on the other hand, we do need more spaces in society that allows people to move on from what they've done. Do you know what I mean?
No,
like,
100%.
We've got to hear both of them. Do you know what I mean? We can't just expect people to be okay with an ex-offender of this or that. Do you mean, like, as part of the rehabilitation is understanding the harm that we've caused to people.
Yeah, and this, it kind of irks me or makes me feel a bit ick when people talk about discrimination against people with offences. Of course, yeah. we have set ourselves up to be discriminated against, and that's where the word originates from. Discriminate, like we've committed a criminal offence. Of course, we're going to be judged by that offence, and it's up to us to prove that we're ready, different, reformed, safe to be around, positive, pro-social, all those lovely attributes that we look for. But, and I think this is where the event has kind of centred upon, I think it's, for me, it's HMPPS's reticence around practicing what they preach. And what basis is that on? Do you know what I mean? It's not on risk, because we've spoken about the statistical, like, you know, likelihood of that happening. It's obviously on impact, but I can't help but feel it's more political in terms of they don't want to be seen to be.
It's the Daily Mail test, isn't it?
It's not sparkly, is it? Let's be honest, in Birmingham, New Leaf now, we are the only support agency that supports all convictions. So Shaw Trust, St Giles Trust, Ixion, Ingeus, Probation, DWP, everybody is sending their SOs and other offences. I mean, we work with multiple murderers and down to the lowest offences. But they're all sending them to us because they just don't know what to do with these people. And for me, that's scary, because then we're into the conversation around risk, and like, I'm a bit gung-ho and a little bit impulsive and actually just want to do the right thing around reducing reoffending, especially for children and women and so on in society. But like, it does feel a bit scary being the only one out there. You know, we're on the path that's least trodden here. We're going into uncharted territory in terms of providing employment support to the least employable members of society. Like, it is scary, and I do have moments where I think, God, if the Daily Fail get hold of this, we're going to be hung, drawn and quarters. But actually, I'm ready for that conversation, and I've got the courage of my own convictions to stand up and say, this is about reducing reoffending, and if I want to reduce the victims of crime, those crimes would be my, you know, if we can reduce one victim from being sexually assaulted, like, that is a huge positive, and I'll die happy in that. Do you know what I mean? In that knowledge.
And we've got to try and stop people from being, you know, in the right place with that offence. Like, you know, we know that people that are in prison for those kind of significant crimes are more likely to get interventions in prison and come back out and reintegrate. But by not supporting them, we risk pushing them into different kinds of offending, such as poverty-related offending around, you know, shoplifting or all those kinds of things. And that's another risk. You know, if we can get them, you know, okay in the community and supported well in the community, that there's less chance of them, you know, diversifying their criminality.
Yeah, one of the things that we've done, because we were great, we've always been great at getting people into work, and we were getting high outcomes before COVID of 60%, but I was always like, what about the other 40%? What about your SOs and your high risk offenders, whatever, you know, whatever they look like? What are we doing for those guys and girls? So we created the New Leaf Co-op, which is around, it's around giving people work that want to work in a safe environment, giving them ownership rights, giving them something to lose, I guess, so that they do choose to be pro-social instead of anti-social, so that they feel like, you know, I've got a stake in society, I've got a reason to be the best person that I can be, as opposed to no one gives a fuck about me, why should I give a fuck about you? Excuse my French. So yeah, for me, I will always stand up with the courage of that. Like, I know what we're doing is right and we're doing it for the right reasons. I do feel like we're going to get bitten, like smacked on the bum eventually. Something's going to go wrong, somebody's going to reoffend, and probably the spotlight's going to be on us at that point. But do you know what? It is what it is. What we can't know is how many crimes we've prevented through these positive interventions, and that's the sad thing, isn't it? Because that just gets overlooked for the one person who did commit another offence, as opposed to the potentially hundreds or thousands that haven't.
I said they always talk about the bad things people did, or probably one bad thing to the 10 good things they've probably done. You know, it's
sad, isn't it? Yeah.
Sorry, Maz, I've got a question. You said earlier that like the likes of Ixion, Shore Trust, and others send their RSOs down to you guys to help. What is it that you do to help them? How is it? What is it that you do different? Because we do find we really struggle with getting RSOs into jobs. I'm not gonna lie, we really struggle. What is it you do differently? How do you manage that? Because what I'm kind of disappointed at is that we've had a networking event here today, and we've had loads of people, and I don't know why you've not been invited, because actually if you're the #1 organisation in Birmingham,
I did try to, but I think I spoke to Adam and he's all the way up in Newcastle.
I connected you with Paul, I believe, in the office.
Yeah.
Paul had emailed you back to say, yeah, we'll connect.
Yeah, because I sent an email to Nicola,
right,
and that to invite him, but I don't know if she forgot.
I don't think we didn't get the invite.
If I knew Gemma was ready, like, you know, I would have come to her straight away and say, like,
I'll put my email address on the chat for anybody who wants it or needs any support or advice or has any networking. Yasmin, if you want to come down for a coffee anyway, you can bring Jem if you want. She's all right in small doses.
I always go to her when I need something.
What we do differently, and I didn't know this is what we did differently to start with, is we deliver person-centered support. So we take a person, however they present at us. We're always asset based. So what's good about you? What skills have you got? What attributes have you got that make you employable? What's holding you back? Have those honest and challenging conversations. So, for example, with SOs, a lot of it is mental health. You know, they do feel shame. They do feel stigma. There is a self-loathing that's there in the majority of SOs that actually makes them they don't like themselves, so why would anybody else like them? So there's a lot of work to be done there, I think, in building the foundations.
I think as well, I don't know if Gemma knows about myself, because I've not really, since I've been, I've not really spoke about myself. Only like recently I've told my manager, but I don't think Gemma knows, because I've been through the system as well.
Yeah.
And you know, when I was at CRC, I was doing my peer mentoring, and then I became a support worker. And then when I moved over here, it was like, but I was just saying to them that here it's not really like spoken about. You have to like push it down because of
Yasmin, I've got a friend, a very close friend, who's a governor of a prison that's got previous convictions. He's got a charge sheet longer than your arm, but nobody can speak about it because it's all hush hush. For me, if I was HMPPS, I'd be shouting that from the rooftops, because what?
Yeah, because when we were at CRC, it was like my video was on the reception, like everyone used to see me. I look at, but I know, like, I don't want to glamorize it, but it's good to.
I don't think it's about glamorizing it. I think it's about actually saying, yeah, this happened. I've been through this experience, and look,
But
you know,
I just feel here it's hard to. Like, that's why I bought this. Like, I was sitting in the main office, and obviously then I had to come in here because I don't want to be like saying it out there, because you don't know what other officers are going to see of you, you know. Understand? Obviously, like Neil knows and Nicola knows, but it's kind of hard to just talk about it because you don't know how people's responses are.
Yeah.
Yasmin, you're not on your own with that. There was a manager of a probation hostel in Birmingham that I was speaking to, and obviously I told the whole team about my lived experience of being a prisoner, and she had to wait for every single staff member to leave the room before she said to me, I've got previous convictions, but I just can't tell anybody. I've been told I can't tell anybody. And I think that's a really unhealthy place to sit, actually, where you can't talk about your history because it's not your authentic self. But I just want to shift things back to what we do differently. I think one of the main things around sexual offences, or any offence, but especially the ones that society find difficult to get their head around, is around disclosure. It's around how you explain, contextualise and prove evidence that you've moved away from that situation. However, you know, why should I trust you? What have you done to minimise your own risk? Like Philip was really open earlier, as well as a couple of the other speakers, around, you know, their sexual offences historically and what they've done, the steps that they've taken to reduce that risk. And clearly they are low risk today, if any risk.
Do you sit with people and sort of talk to prospective employers with whoever you're working with? So say I don't know who Philip is, but would you sit with Philip and like disclose with him, or would you just expect him to disclose himself?
It's not empowering. No, because I think a disclosure has to come from your heart. It has to be an authentic, personal communication of how you feel about that. I wasn't there, and actually, if I'm doing your disclosure for you, where is the accountability there? Where is the it doesn't
we had
work.
someone, we were in CRC, there was one of our colleagues, she actually talked to them on ways to do it, because some people were obviously nervous and they didn't know how to disclose, so she would go through it with them.
Yeah, we do that.
Yeah,
we've got a template letter, but it's not when I say template.
I don't know about, we haven't got anyone that will help, like, do you know of
your probation practitioner should help you and talk to you about ways that you can disclose certain offences to prospective employers. We've got different ways of doing it.
I know ETE used to, but I'm not sure if they still.
Can I tell you what probation's blanket? Well, this was what I was told by, I think it was probation officers. Their blanket kind of response to disclosure was, you only have to say the offence. So what disclosure is, you only have to tell them the offence. And I was like, well, no, I'm an employer of people with convictions. That isn't going to be enough for me. What you want as an employer, you don't want to be left with any questions about that person. Your disclosure has to almost settle all the questions before the employers even thought of them, if that makes sense. So what I want to know in a disclosure is what you did, when you did it, why you did it, what was the context, what led to it, what was the consequence of it, what have you done since to reduce that risk? I've reduced my substance misuse, I've accessed counselling, I've been looking for work for 2 years, I haven't committed another offence, you know, and then finally end it on a positive of why you would be a good employee for that employer. You know, yeah, I'm not going to go anywhere, you know, I'm going to be with you for the next 15 years of my working life. Like, that's what employers want to hear. But it's not easy, I'll be honest, and that's what I was just saying about the co-op, you know.
As in the co-op, like
no, it's a cooperative is where the people that work for it, well, it is similar to the co-op, but it's not the shop or the funeral service. But a cooperative is almost like a socialist business where the people that work for it own it. So we set up the co-op, a couple of years ago now, with a view to employing the people that nobody else will employ. So your SOs, your high risk offenders, because we feel like we can do that and we are happy to take on that perceived risk. But also, I think what that does is it gives people ownership rights. It drives down, reoffending. It gives people a chance at like self-actualizing, which is what we were talking about. But yeah, so we've just launched our ethical recruitment agency with 100 grand's worth of investment that we got. It's been all over the news and stuff.
Oh yeah, I saw it in BBC, I think. So on the BBC website.
Yeah, so that's really exciting, and it is around getting people into work regardless of their offences. Some employers will categorically say, we don't want this, you know, we don't want these level of offenders. And there's little we can do around that other than challenge them with the stats and the fact that I've taken on people with sexual offences, multiple people, and never had a bad experience in terms of, you know, risk to staff or teammates. That's all we can do really, I think, is practice what we preach and try and look for other mechanisms to help people get a foot on the ladder and lead some sort of normal life and reduce victims of crime, which is what we all care about mostly.
And I feel like with offenders with them kind of offences, they know they've got more to lose if they messed up, you know, if they were given the opportunity individual.
The
They
circle of
know
the
that
person.
life in prison, is it really worth it for another offence? So they're more compliant than a normal person you pick off the street and hire, you know, because you don't know what they're capable of, because they haven't declared anything, because they haven't got a conviction, but having the convictions that haven't been declared or haven't picked up by the police, you don't know, do you? So somebody sit there, told you everything about their life. Or do you think they're really going to commit an offence? Like, you know what I mean?
We're going to have to wrap up shortly. So I'm going to go to the two people with their hands up. I don't know who was first. Sorry, do you add?
Philip first and then Carly.
With regards to disclosure, every CV I would put either to a prospective employer or whether it would be online to an agency, I would always, I would have my CV as a short CV, and then on the back of that, I would put a disclosure statement, which would basically say, I believe I have the qualities for the job. However, I feel that I must address this to make you aware that I was convicted in 2017 of this offence, and list how you were in the prison system, like whether you were a red band or a blue band, whether you had trusted roles, and any courses that you did to address offending, etc., and re-offending, just to make them aware. And that then puts the onus on the employer to ensure that they read every CV properly, because they can't then say 6 months down the line, we know you've got this, we now know you've got this offence, we can't employ you, because it's been there right from the start in black and white with that employer. And also disclosures is also important, not just for employers, but for if you are developing new relationships. For instance, I became divorced halfway within the first year of being out, and then in the second year, I started going. I went on to Match, found my partner, but then you have a new partner, and if you feel that that is developing in the way that you want it to be, you have to disclose to them as well, and you have to do that quite early on. So that again, but that has to come, like you say, it has to come from the heart, and it's not something that you can just talk about within 5 minutes. And it's something which will take, when I told my current partner, when I told her about the what I was convicted of, etc., I think that went on for about 3 hours, and allow them to ask as many questions as they feel they need to, and something not that it can be forgotten about. And if they want to ask any question or bring it up, they feel that they should be able to ask you and get the appropriate response.
I'll be honest, I think my advice would be to not declare unless your probation officer is telling you that you have to declare to every to declare to every employer. My advice would be don't declare unless you've been asked. Do you know what I mean? Because automatically you're kind of ruling yourself out. And like you said, unless you're looking me in the eye, like it's so easy, isn't it? If you've got 50 CVs to just filter out, like why would I even entertain somebody with a sex offence if I've got 4? I mean, I would as an employer, but I'm talking generically. So I think our advice would be to even just put to be discussed at interview, because when you're looking them in the eye and you're contextualising it with our support in the background and a letter then to back it up so they can go away and really absorb what you've said in your way that you want, your controlled way. I think that for me that would be the advice that I'd give, rather than to declare it in the first instance, just because I think you're really brave doing that, but I'd be very surprised if anybody would give you an opportunity, being honest.
It was quite difficult, because you had like a generic template, and it's like, okay, I could maybe get little snippets from that. In the end, I made my own kind of disclosure letter,
I'm so sorry, guys. We're going to have to wrap up just because
no worries.
We've got I've got another meeting on.
We'll quickly go to Carly before we go.
Yeah, do you want me to leave you guys to it? I mean, I've just got another meeting at 4 p.m, so I'm happy to leave you guys to it. Yeah.
I'll wrap things up in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Carly?
Lovely to see you, Mary Claire.
And you all. See you all soon. See you at the next discussion event. I love.
Have you got your email on the
Yeah,
chat?
put it on the chat. It's just up the road a little bit, but it's maryclaire@newleafcic.org. Where is it actually? I did do it. It's on there somewhere, Yasmin. Sorry.
Okay.
Hang on, let me do it again before I go. I've just told him I'm going to be late anyway. Yeah, put us on that networking thing, the events thing, because we would love to be there, and especially to talk to you about your young people, Yasmin, because we've got our new next leadership cohort starting soon. But anyway, see you all later. Take care. Thanks for the authenticity and vulnerability as always. Bye. Bye.